Welcome to the latest episode of the Catalyst Health and Wellness Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Cooper, and today's episode will come from a little different angle, the customer experience. If you're in a leadership, management, or entrepreneurial role, I think you'll find our guest insights fascinating. But we'll also bring the discussion back to how wellness program managers and coaches can utilize these strategies in their everyday lives. Our guest is Don Peppers, who wrote a book back in 1993 titled The One-to-One Future. Businessweek called it the Bible of the New Marketing, and Inc. magazine's editor, I love this, called it one of the 2 or 3 most important business books ever written. On a personal level, I agreed. The concepts in that book were instrumental in the way we designed U.S. corporate wellness when we first developed it to focus on the one-on-one relationship between the employee and their own personal wellness coach. Mr. Peppers is a marketing futurist and trend spotter, which you'll clearly hear during our interview. He's gone on to write 9 books, which have sold over 1 million copies and been translated into 18 languages. He earned a degree in astronautical engineering from the Air Force Academy, as well as a master's from Princeton, and he's pretty sure he's the only actual rocket scientist in the advertising industry. For those of you who happen to be involved in your organization's health and wellness program strategy, but you just sense something's missing, especially after listening to this, I'd be happy to set up a call to discuss different options. I rarely mention this on the podcast, but our company, U.S. Corporate Wellness, provides comprehensive wellness programming to organizations across the country. But if you already have a program in place, you don't want to start over, but you do want to make it more personally meaningful for your team members, it's very easy for us. We're doing much more of this these days where we just integrate the coaching, this best-in-class coaching, into any program, and we can practically do it overnight. So reach out to me. My personal email is bcooper@uscorporatewellness.com. That's bcooper@uscorporatewellness.com if you'd like to do a little brainstorming. Now, it's time to go one-on-one with Don Peppers on this episode of the Catalyst Health and Wellness Coaching Podcast. Don, it is a pleasure to have you on the show tonight. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, Brad.
The book that you wrote with Martha Rogers in '93, The One-to-One Future, that I've shared with you offline, that changed my perspective on a lot of things. And frankly, I think it changed the way organizations looked at marketing and moved the focus over to the individual. You were basically a decade ahead of the rest of the world, but now people think it must have always been that way. With all of those changes, 20 years or so, 25
years. We published that book 25 years ago.
Wow. With all of the changes, what have we learned in recent years about this whole one-to-one relationship?
Well, the whole idea of building relationships with customers was something Martha and I thought would be inevitable with the development of interactivity and better computer technology and so forth. And it turns out that we were right. But the customer relationship revolution really has morphed into the customer experience revolution. And if you think about it now, very few businesses go to business without thinking carefully about the experience their customers have in buying the product, using the product, returning the product if they need to, or getting repaired. They think carefully about each customer's journey or experience with the product. And businesses have learned to think that way because it used to be that they had to think of the average customer, and they can hypothesize things, but a lot of times they were wrong, and
Sure.
They needed a lot of market research. And now you can treat different customers differently based on what you learned about them and so forth. And so the CX discipline, the customer experience discipline, is in full flower now. I think if you think carefully about the experience that customers have with you, you'll realize that customers don't buy your product in order to have an experience. Okay, they buy the product because they want to solve a problem or meet some need, right? So the ideal experience would be no experience. The problem just goes away. That'd be the most convenient customer experience. Your product solves my problem without me doing a thing. So increasingly, brands are looking to create frictionless experiences, an experience that the customer almost doesn't notice, that they can easily put their product to use and so forth. And sucking the friction out of the experience is what businesses are using automation to do, and machine learning and artificial intelligence. What they've learned, however, is that customers also crave human contact. Okay, they want the human connection. They want to be engaged. They want, what a customer wants is to be emotionally attached to. If the customer is going to be loyal to you, you need that engagement, that attachment, and I think that's something that the businesses are now coming to grips with in droves. I know that just while on the subject, I know that there was a 2018 PwC study survey 15,000 consumers. 75% said they want more human contact, not less. Okay?
Wow.
So I think that's the newest direction we need to move in, is human contact and engagement, level of engagement.
That is fascinating, especially with the audience we're talking about. And it kind of sets up the next question, because most of our listeners are either health and wellness coaches, or they're thinking about going that way, or they're involved in some way with their employer's wellness program. And it's still the same concept. So this idea that the majority of folks are not saying, oh yeah, an app is fine. Oh yeah, a website's fine. I want that human contact. That's where these coaches are coming in and having an impact. So with that in mind, let's look at this in two different ways. Let's look at the employer. So somebody who's involved in helping organize the employer's approach to health and wellness. So this is increasing participation, engagement, and we'll talk more specifically about engagement in a minute, because I know that's a big focus of yours now. But how does that, as an organization, thoughts on how they can increase employee participation and engagement in their wellness program? And you can generalize that, because this is, that's not your specific area, but guidance in that area that you can provide us.
I've done a lot of thinking in that area, and I'm doing more and more presentations on this topic. The whole idea around customer experience is to put yourself in the customer's shoes and imagine what life would be like, and how would you like to be treated if you were the customer. I think employers have exactly the same problem when they deal with their employees. What would you like to be treated like if you were the employee? How is your employee experiencing the job? And again, friction is the enemy. You'd be surprised how many companies have great technologies for their customers, but the technology the employee has to use is outdated or overused. It's not useful enough. Sometimes you can talk to contact center people who have 4 or 5 screens open at one time just to get the drill down on the information about customers. So a lot of times employers are not as diligent about taking the friction out of their employee experiences as they are about using automation and technology to take the friction out of their customer experiences. And so you have to do that first. First, you have to take the friction out of the employee experience, right? No matter who your workers are, and you don't want to have to go to trouble to do their job. You want them to be able to do their job. But once you've done that, then you need to make the emotional connection with the employee also, as if you were a customer or she. You want the employee to want to work with you, like you want your customer to want to buy from you. Why? Well, it could be because there's some mission that underlies your business that you want your employees to. You want employees who embrace that mission. It could be that you're letting your employees master their skill and take charge and become more involved in solving customer problems and things like that. There are many ways you can engage your employees, but overall, you want those employees to have a streamlined, frictionless experience, and to sort of bridge the gap between reducing friction and permitting engagement. The employee has to be well. They have to be healthy. They have to be able to think about the business and not just their personal problems or their declining health or the financial disaster awaiting at home or whatever.
Because that's additional friction.
That's friction. That's friction. I think a lot of times employers and maybe not the audience on this podcast, but there are a lot of employers, and we all know them, who treat their employees like they were robots or algorithms. You know, here's the process, here's the rules. You just touch tab A with box B, and that's what we do. But employees, are human beings, and you want to embrace their humanity. And that sometimes means admitting faults, being honest, being straightforward with employees, and you want them to embrace your mission in the business world.
That's fantastic. Yeah, this is going a fun direction. All right, let's shift it just slightly to the individual who's trying to start their own business, whether it's a health and wellness coach or in some other business, but they're trying to garner more clients. They're trying to give their one-on-one clients these great experiences. Any tips that might fit into that bucket?
Yeah. If I were starting a new business, I would make sure that everybody in my company understands that the goal is not just immediate sales. That's important. But what's really, really even more important is that when we get new customers in, we want to cultivate those customer relationships so they become repeat customers, they become recommenders, that they recommend us to their friends, that they like us, we want them to be delighted and happy with the service or product that we've given. You can amuse them or entertain them. You can amaze them. But find a way to surpass your customers' expectations. And this is harder and harder because customers' expectations are going up and up and up. But today it's still possible. It's still possible with some basic human decency to be friendly with customers and to make them your friends. Friends buy more from friends than they buy from others.
Yeah. And price is rarely the issue anymore. It tends to be that relationship. And I love that word delighted. I wrote that down in all caps. That is a key word. If we can keep that in mind, that's going to go a long way to get results.
But I want you to keep in mind something, okay? Your employees that you're asking to do this, you can't write a business rule or a process rule or a line of code that results in employees delighting customers. The employee has to want to do that. So how do you have employees first who want to do that? You want the employees to be engaged enough to do that. And that's a strong business.
Beautiful. All right, let's talk engagement specifically. That's been an area of emphasis for you in recent years. Yeah. Why is engagement so important? And you've touched on that a little bit, but could you expand on that a little bit more for us?
Well, engagement inherently implies an emotional connection. And so it's not just a flawless experience, whether you're the customer or the employee, but it's endearing or it's happy. It makes you happy. It gives you a good feeling. And as the saying goes, you won't remember what I say, but you will remember how I make you feel.
Yep.
And I think that that's a really, really important aspect of what we're talking about with employees, especially. Now, there are a lot of ways you can do that. Let me just give you a couple of examples. Okay. I talked with a company in Australia, and they said that they sell a complicated product, and sometimes a customer calls in and they have a problem with the product, and they contact the contact center, right? And they have this problem, but the customer didn't use the product correctly. Maybe they didn't install it right. It's a complex thing. Maybe they thought they'd take a shortcut or whatever. And sometimes a problem is encountered for which the customer service agent, there's no good solution, let's say. And the customer's clearly at least at fault, partly.
Sure.
But rather than simply say, "Sir, I'm sorry, you just didn't follow the directions that your SOL on this. The customer service agent is encouraged to say, look, Mr. Peppers, you bought your product, and thank you very much, but you didn't really install it the right way. And now, I'll tell you what do you think would be fair? And then they shut up and they let the customer say, well, okay, how about if I get half my money back and you send me another product, something like that. I make a suggestion. Now, that's an engaging thing to say. What do you think would be fair? Right, is a terrifically engaging idea with a customer in the right circumstances. And it introduces an element of humanity. No chatbot will ever suggest that. And if I were discussing something with a chatbot and he asked me what I thought was fair, I'd try to game the system because he's got no feelings. He's just a piece of code. So that's an example of how forward-thinking companies are relying on their employees not just as costs and ciphers of following rules and procedures and reading the script that the computer says, but using their brains and their judgment and their wisdom to improve the lives of their customers in a way that's fulfilling for the employee. The employees love this program because it lets them assert themselves and help the customer at the same time while they feel like they're being responsible. I'll give you one other example. There's a bank that when a customer calls in and has a problem for which the contact center agent, the computer doesn't have any solution for it, right? There's no scripted solution for this problem. The agent can, if they think they know a fair thing to do for the customer, that's fair for the customer and fair for the bank, they're authorized to offer it automatically to the customer immediately. All they need to do is get the permission of the agreement of one other contact center agent, one other frontline employee. Do you think this is a fair thing to do? Yeah, I agree. So we both sign off on it. Now I'm going to say, here, Mr. Peppers, how about we do this? And I make that suggestion. I talked to the CMO at the bank that had introduced this program a few months after she had introduced it. She said in the 4 or 5 months they'd been running the program, they had only had a 20 or 30 two-person solutions. They hadn't had to reverse any one. Several of them had been used as models for, had rolled out to the whole system. But she said what was really interesting was that her contact center employees were all jazzed. They're all wired now because they're largely charged. They're helping customers on their own. And I think that's the kind of relying on our humanity. Humanity is an asset. It's not a cost or a weakness. It's an asset. The question is, how do you tap into it the right way?
So good. All right. Let me try to put this in a coaching context and see if you have some thoughts here. Let's say you're a health and wellness coach and you're coaching me and you've been coaching me for 6 months. And I come to you and say, Don, I'm just not getting better. I'm just not improving, whatever it is that we're working on. And you know, as the coach, you've looked at the notes, you've looked at our conversations, our goals set. You know, I frankly haven't been doing much. I've had these things, I make commitments to you, and then I walk away and I do things completely different. Any tips on how that might play out?
Well, that's the kind of thing that a teacher would learn right away. I'm telling you, you probably know better than I do, but I would say you let the employee describe their own progress, and you ask the employee to assess themselves. The employee probably knows what's happening, and then have a discussion with the employee about, what can we both do? It's a mutual problem. We have this mutual problem. We both want your level of engagement to improve and your happiness to improve on the job and so forth. What can we do? And you put it in a collaborative framework like that. And by the way, I got to say, the modern organizations are much more collaborative than old line organizations were. The old industrial model of command and control, top-down bureaucracy is no longer really working like it used to. There's no employee that's more than a click away from the CEO if they want to. So increasingly, fostering collaborative approaches and trust-based cooperation is a key skill. I have a personal feeling that within a generation or maybe two, the majority of senior managers are going to be women because, and don't call me sexist for saying this, but I do think women are fundamentally more naturally collaborative than men.
Well, the whole EQ. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's where I'd go. I'd say, you try to turn it into a mutually solvable problem, and don't jump to solutions, but start with the problem and make sure the employee, takes as much ownership of the problem as you do, and work with them to try to solve it jointly.
Very good. Very good. And I think that is consistent with the way that most coaches would approach that. But I was just curious from your perspective. So I'm glad to see those line up. All right. So surprises with engagement. What have you learned about this concept of engagement that might surprise our listeners?
Well, the whole idea of engagement, because it's emotional, the first surprise is you can't really measure it with a survey. Not very well. You just can't measure it with a survey very well. And levels of engagement change these days so rapidly. The surveys of engagement that you'll see, if you measure engagement every year at the same time, the field of behavioral economics,
Sure.
People are emotional, and Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky won the Nobel Prize. Well, Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for behavioral economics field a few years ago, and one of the things that they are famous for suggesting is that when people are investing or buying things, all change is relative. Okay, so if you look at a person's life in purely rational economic terms, let's suppose you have two people, Amy and Bob. Each one is worth $1 million today. An economist would say they should be equally happy. Okay, but suppose I tell you that yesterday Amy was only worth $500,000 and today she's worth $1 million. Yesterday Bob was worth $2 million, but today he's only worth $1 million. Now, do you think they're equally happy? Of course not.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course not. Engagement is like that. If I ask you about your engagement in your job, the answer you're going to give me is, well, relative to what? My life in general, relative to what happened last month or the month before or the week before that? It's an inherently subjective metric, and you have to normalize engagement surveys. But what people are finding is that when they look at engagement surveys, they're finding that levels of reported engagement are fluctuating much more rapidly today than they would have, 15, 20 years ago, probably because the pace of change is accelerating. So I think something that's important is that you have to measure it on a more frequent basis, and you have to do it in a way that where your surveys are supplemented by actual interviews, human interviews, and fact-finding missions, and that's something that a lot of HR people don't really do as well as they probably ought to. They're much more into surveys and online reporting. Another thing is, if you're looking at the level of productivity and value creation that an employee has, you want an employee that's loyal to you, that is engaged, enthusiastic, and works hard. Well, there are three separate kinds of determinants. A person could be engaged with the job. I really like my job. They could be engaged with the company. I love the company I'm working for. But they also have their own intrinsic level of motivation. That's what we call grit. Some people are just stick to it all the time. This really bull ahead. They go ahead and do it. And all three of these types of asset in an employee, there are three distinct values. And you really have to think carefully about them, because a person's level of intrinsic motivation is probably the single most important aspect of those, over and above the engagement with the job and the engagement of the company. The second most valuable metric is probably engagement to the job. Engagement to the company sort of comes last, because the company allows them to do the job in a sense. So we really have to think carefully when we begin to measure employee engagement, and it's not just a number. It's complicated.
Okay, so speaking of complicated, is there a way for a coach who's in a one-on-one relationship already? That's their role. They're serving this individual client, whether that's an employee or a private client. Is there a way for that coach to glean some concept about how is that client's engagement? How is that employee's engagement with them as a coach?
Well, yeah, if you have regular interaction with an employee, worker, you're coaching somebody. I would assume that the interactions, whether they're daily or weekly or monthly, you should keep a record, a notebook, and you might want to have your own sort of mood meter for employees, and when an employee's in a good mood or a bad mood, you remark on it to the employee. It's almost like psychoanalysis. I mean, you want the employee to speak back to you in a way that the employee can understand himself or herself. So I think that the only thing I'm saying about engagement is that the employee has to have the friction taken out of the experience. So he needs to have the right technology and tools and data to do the job, and the authority to take action and so forth. All those are friction. But once that friction is taken out, then you want the employee to be able to feel a sense of mastery over what they're doing, the way that contact center agent might feel when they come up with a solution to a problem that the computer didn't have yet. You want them to feel like they're appreciated by their colleagues, by the employees themselves. You want them to be liked by the customers or the employees they're working with, and I guess in the long run, I think the real competitive battle is going to go to the employees and managers who are most able to apply what philosophers call the principle of reciprocity. How good am I at treating others the way I would like to be treated if I were in their situation? How good am I at that? Am I defensive? Am I constantly looking for the numbers? Am I really trying to understand what's going on with the employee I'm coaching? And my feeling is that principle of reciprocity, which is found in every major religion, in Christian religion, it's called the Golden Rule. Mm-hmm. But it's in every major religion, except for one. There's one religion that has no principle of reciprocity: voodoo. In voodoo, God is bad. You just stay out of his way.
Right.
Yeah. But every ethical philosophy begins with this idea that you should treat others the way you'd like to be treated if you were they. And that's the way an employer should be treating its employees, and that's the way a business should be treating its customers, frankly. So that would be my true north if I was looking for direction.
Perfect. All right. You mentioned a little bit about this next question earlier in terms of the friction that's reduced with the employee, but we do have some HR managers, some benefit consultants that listen in. So let's target this to them. Some studies are starting to show that health and wellness programs can help, if they're done well with the personal coaching piece, can improve the overall things like turnover, presenteeism, that kind of thing.
Definitely.
Any insights on why you think that's the case? Why does the coaching part of that, the health and wellness coaching, not the employee coaching, not the executive coaching, health and wellness coaching, why does that positively influence those aspects?
Well, I don't have research on this.
Sure.
But I suspect that the fact that people's reported level of engagement goes up and down with time, goes up and down, up and down, up and down, okay, reflects the up and down of their lives. And that sort of represents friction in their lives. When I have friction, I feel less engagement. When I don't have friction, okay, so there is research on customers, and something that's interesting is that the CEB, the Corporate Executive Board, found in a survey of almost 100,000 consumers that there's very little correlation between customer satisfaction and customer loyalty. And the reason for that is because there's lots of companies you can go to and you'll be just equally satisfied. However, there's a great deal of correlation between customer dissatisfaction and disloyalty. So that's friction. So employee loyalty is the same. And the friction occurs when I wasn't able to get something done that I should have been able to do simply because the tools aren't there, or when I had to spend the morning trying to figure out how to get my car out of hock because I got in an accident and I can't afford the payments, or my kids need back to school stuff and the payday isn't until 2 weeks from now, and I got to do this. So I have some personal issue that I'm dealing with in my life, and it's causing friction. One of the reasons why friction causes people to leave is because it gives them the chance to think about, it gives them the motive to think about what might be at some other place. And I think that when you are well, mentally, physically well, when you're financially well, when you feel like your life is in good shape, you have less friction and you have less reason to consider going someplace else. So you're less likely to go on to do your job on autopilot, or what they call presenteeism, right? You're less likely to be tempted to try to find other employment, and I think that's and studies have shown that at least I know that financial wellness, for instance, is a key driver of employee attrition. If I'm in a financial problem, hey, and I can find a job for 50 cents more an hour, I might just take it.
Sure.
And so I think for wellness coaches, detecting those moments of friction is really critical.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. So for you personally, as a consultant, speaker, obviously you've got a reputation. People know you, but even so, how are you integrating the one-to-one marketing, the focus on engagement in your business?
Well, I run a small business, only a few people, but I've always believed in a sharing kind of business. So we have a business. It's a speaking business. So we collect fees and we split those fees up among us. And it's a kind of a co-op, but I'm a very simple situation because it's a small business. It's my business. It's personal performance, and it's a lot of fun. And I, truth be told, I probably do it for free.
I won't tell anybody.
No, don't tell them.
All right. You touched on this one earlier too. We're in the last two questions here, but as you peer into your crystal ball, where do you see the next steps in terms of the one-on-one engagement focused approaches?
Well, one easy fix you see today more and more, it has to do with the financial stress that frontline workers are in. The widely quoted statistic is something like 60% of consumers don't even have $400 to spend if they run into an emergency. And believe it or not, one of the very last vestiges of the batch processing technology is payday. We all get paid on the same day. I mean, if I work in a 9-to-5 job, I work 9 to 5, 9 to 5, 9 to 5, but I have to work 10 days before I get paid.
Right.
And so you see a lot of people who are financially strapped, not that they don't haven't earned the money, but they just don't have the pay yet
Mm.
for it. And one sign of that is the prevalence of payday lenders in this country. Did you know there are more payday lender operations than there are McDonald's outlets in this country?
Oh my word.
Can you
Wow.
imagine that? Yeah, yeah. Because you and I probably don't see them that much, but a lot of people see them all the time. So earned wage access is a burgeoning field. I'm advising one company, Pay Active, that makes earned. You can, if you're an employer, you offer Pay Active to your employees as an app. They download it on their smartphone, and on any given day, they can see how much money they've earned but not yet been paid. They can push a button and they can access a portion of it immediately for just a small membership fee. They don't have to pay the 40% interest or $50 copay that you'd have to pay at a payday lender or a title lender. And it's been shown to dramatically improve employee retention. I think it's only a matter of time before everybody has access to the pay they've already earned when they've earned it. And then it's up to you as an employee. You can make an adult decision about when you take your pay. Do you wait? Do you take it now? Do you take it then? And it's more of an economic decision. You're not just working for the company store anymore. It's your money.
Right. Very good. All right. Last one, wide open. Any final words of wisdom for those who are involved in the whole health and wellness arena in terms of increasing their influence over the coming years?
Yeah. Back to the principle of reciprocity, treating employees the way you'd like to be treated if you were the employee. I don't think your employees work for you just for the salary and the compensation. They're going to want to work with you when they think that you have their interest at heart, okay? Not just your own company's profits or efficiency. And so I would urge everyone in HR departments all around the country, around the world, to begin thinking of their employees as human beings with lives who want to mean something to the company. And they're not just arms and legs attached to a brain. They are thinking, feeling human beings with emotions and creativity and wisdom and empathy and the ability to connect with your customers. And so let's use them that way.
So in a coaching setting, you're saying we make sure they get it, that you really care. You're not just checking boxes. You're not just calling them because they're next on your list. You want to make sure that client understands you're coaching me. And yes, it's part of your job, but you really care about me as your client.
Yes. Yeah. And think of it this way. The business goal of hiring an employee is to have that employee create value for the business. You want to create the most value for your business with every employee, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So my argument is that the employee is likely to create the most value for his employer at about the time that he thinks the employer is creating the most value for him or her. Now, when is that? It's when they think that you're acting in their interest, when you have their interest at heart. That's when you're creating so much value for your employees. So that's going to, in the end, be a really long-lasting business advantage to have employees and employers that have a mutually reinforced relationship based on trust.
Don, I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.
Brad, it was my pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Did you catch all of that? An effective health and wellness strategy reduces friction for employees in their everyday pursuits. As an employee, people crave human contact. 75% of people want more, not less, human contact in their interactions. Folks, this is powerful stuff. That's why you, as a health and wellness coach, or maybe you're thinking about going that route, health and wellness coaching matters. It's so critical to engagement and to outcomes. I don't know if you caught this, but I loved his concept of this delighted customers. You know, we always hear about exceed expectations. Yeah. That's like 100 years ago. But delighted customers due to relationships. What a powerful word. Such an important element for us to remember, regardless of what our role is. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. After our first 50 episodes, we looked back over the topics we covered and realized we pretty much neglected the business side of health and wellness and wellness coaching. So I actually reached out to 4 of the most respected experts worldwide that I could think of. All the books I'd read, everything else, said, let's try it. And all four of them were kind enough to say yes. It goes without saying, we were thrilled. They've been so gracious, and we've got 2 more that I know you're going to love. If you're wanting to pursue your wellness coach certification before the national board exam requirements increase, our next fast track in Colorado is February 8th and 9th. Or if that one's sold out or the date doesn't work for you, you can join us on April 4th and 5th, also in Colorado. Or you can pick the distance learning option as well. And you'll want to contact us if you're debating between those 2, because there are a few subtle differences in terms of outcomes. Details at catalystcoachinginstitute.com, or if you've got questions, email us anytime, results@catalystcoachinginstitute.com. Now, it's time for better. Remember, folks, wellness is not all about food and fitness. Wellness is about better. Taking one often small step toward becoming better than we were yesterday, or helping someone else become better than they were yesterday. Sometimes that may involve food or exercise decisions, but it could just as well involve sleep, life balance, stress channeling, relationship development, or dozens of other components. If your health and wellness program at your company is all about food and fitness, or if you've been focusing on just those things as a coach, maybe it's time for a change. And maybe you're the one who can help change it. Thanks for joining us. This is Dr. Bradford Cooper signing off. Make it a great rest of your day, and I'll speak with you soon on the next episode of the Catalyst Health and Wellness Coaching Podcast.